Welcome to Executive Order Watch.
The immigrants have arrived.
I know. I have the package.
After such identification, and in a manner to one signed to ensure such individuals comprehend, two sign of such notification. SEC 112,104. Excise tax on remittance transfers. G. Chapter 36 is amended by insert. After subchapter B, the following new subchapter. Subchapter C, remittance transfers sec. 4475, imposition of tax. I in general. The tax imposed by this section with respect to any remittance transfer shall be paid by the sender with respect to such transfer. C. The remittance transfer provider with respect to any remittance transfer shall collect the amount of the tax imposed under subsection with respect to such transfer from the sender and remit such tax quarterly to the Secretary at such time and in such manner as provided by the Secretary. SC 4075, imposition of tax. Percent of the amount 10 of such transfer. Secondary liability. Where any tax imposed by subsection is not paid at the time 1038. I in general. Subsection shall not apply to any remittance transfer with respect to which the remittance transfer per provider is a qualified remittance transfer provider and the sender is a verified United States sender. Qualified remittance transfer pro. For purposes of this subsection, the term qualified remittance transfer provider means any remittance transfer provider which enters into a written agreement with the Secretary pursuant to which such provider agrees to verify the status of senders as citizens or nationals of the United States. In such manner and in accordance with such procedures as the Secretary may specify. Verified United States sender for purposes of this subsection. Term verified United States sender means any sender who is verified by a qualified remittance transfer provider as being a 1039 citizen or national of the United States pursuant to an agreement described in paragraph D. For purposes of this section, the three terms remittance transfer provider for designated recipient, and sender shall each have the respective meanings given such terms by Section 920 of 6 the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. Application of AR for 9 purposes of Section 7701 with respect to any multiple 10-party arrangements involving the sender, a remittance 11 transfer shall be treated as a financing transaction. 12. Subpart 15C of Part 4 of Subchapter Chapter 1 is amended 16 by inserting after Section 36B the following new section, 17 SEC. 36C, credit for excise tax on remittance 18 transfers of citizens and nationals of 19 the United States. 20. IG in the case of any individual. 21. There shall be allowed as a credit against the tax imposed 22 by this subtitle for any taxable year, an amount equal to 23, the aggregate amount of taxes paid by such individual 24 under Section 4475 during such taxable year. 25. 1040. SN. No credit shall be allowed 2 under this section unless the taxpayer includes on 3 the return of tax for the taxable year 4. the individual's social security num 5 bur and 6. If the individual is married, the social 7 security number of such individual's spouse. Social security number. For per 9 poses of this subsection, the term social security 10 number has the meaning given such term in section 1124. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 was paid by the taxpayer in 20 is with respect to a remittance transfer 21 with respect to which the taxpayer provided to the 22 married individuals. Rules similar to the rules of section 32 shall apply to this section. SR. No credit shall be allowed under this section unless the taxpayer demonstrates to the satisfaction of the Secretary that the tax under section 4475 with respect to which such credit is determined. Remittance transfer provider. The certification and information referred to in section 6050 BB 1041. Any term used in this section 1 which is also used in section 4475 shall have the meaning 2 given such term in section 4475. Application of AR. For 4 rules providing for the application of the anti-conduit rules 5 of section 7701 to remittance transfers, see section 64475. 6050 BB, returns relating to remittance 1415. IG, each remittance transfer pro 16 viter shall make a return at such time as the Secretary 17th provide setting forth 18. In the case of a qualified remittance trans, 19 for provider with respect to remittance transfers to 20, which section 4475 does not apply by reason of 21 section 4475. The aggregate number and value of 22 such transfers 23. In the case of any remittance transfer not 24 described in paragraph, and with respect to 25. R reporting by RTPA 9. IN General. Subpart B of Part 3 of Subchapter A of Chapter 61, as amended by the preceding provisions of this Act, is amended by adding at the end the following new section. 1042. Which the sender certifies to the remittance transfer 1 provider an intent to claim the credit under section 236C and provides the information described in para 3 graph 4, the name, address, and social security 5 number of the sender 6. The amount of tax paid by the sender 7 under section 4475 and 8. The amount of tax remitted by the RE9 remittance transfer provider under section 104475 and 11. In the case of any remittance transfer not 12 included under paragraph or 13. The aggregate amount of tax paid 14 under section 4475 with respect to such 15 transfers and 16. The aggregate amount of tax remitted 17 under section 4475 with respect to such 18 transfers. 19. Statement to BF furnished to N20P. Every person required to make a return under 21 subsection shall furnish, at such time as the Secretary may 22nd provide, to each person whose name is required to 23 be set forth in such return a written statement showing 24. 1043. The name and address of the information 1 contact of the required reporting person and 2. The information described in subsection 3, which relates to such person. D. Any term used in this section 5, which is also used in section 4475, shall have the meaning 6 given such term in such section. 7. P. Section 6724, as amended 8 by the preceding provisions of this Act, is amend 9 ed 10. In paragraph, by striking or 11 at the end of clause, by striking and 12 at the end of clause and inserting 13, and by adding at the end the following new 14 clause. 15 section 6050 BB 17 and 18. In paragraph, by striking or at 19, the end of subparagraph, by striking the 20 period at the end of subparagraph and in 21 inserting or, and by inserting after subpara 22 graph, the following new subparagraph. 23 minutes section 6050 BB. 25. 1044. Section 6211 is amended by insert 2ing 36C after 36B. 3. Section 6213, as amended by the preceding provisions of this Act, is amended by striking 5 and at the end of subparagraph, by the strict sixing the period at the end of subparagraph and 7 inserting N, and by inserting after subpar 8 graph the following new subparagraph. 9. An omission of a correct social secu 10 RIDI number under section 36C to be in 11 included on a return. Section 1324 of Title 31 United 13 States Code is amended by inserting 36C after 1436B. 15. The table of sections for Subpart C of Part 16 of E of Subchapter A of Chapter 1 is amended by in 17 inserting after the item relating to Section 36B the full 18 lowing new item 19. Sec 36C credit for excise tax on remittance transfers of citizens and nationals of the United States. The table of sections for Subpart B of Part 23 of Subchapter A of Chapter 61 is amended by 21 add at the end the following new item 22. Sec 6050BB returns relating to remittance transfers. 1045. The table of subchapters for Chapter 36 is amended by inserting after the item relating to Subchapter B the following new item, remittance transfers. 1 to 3. ED 45678 9 10 11 12 SEC. 112105. Social Security Number Requirement 13 for American Opportunity and Life 14-time Learning Credits. C. Section 25A is amended to read as follows 17 lows 18. Identification requirement 19. Social Security number required 20. No credit shall be allowed under sub 21 section to a taxpayer unless the taxpayer in 22 includes on the return of tax for the taxable 23 year 24. In general. Except as otherwise provided in this subsection, the amendments made by this section shall apply to transfers made after December 31st, 2025. Tax credit. The amendments made by subsection and paragraphs through of subsection shall apply to tax-flexible years ending after December 31st, 2025. 1046. In the case of a credit with respect to the qualified tuition and related expenses of an individual other than the taxpayer or the taxpayer's spouse, the name and social security number of such individual. No American Opportunity Tax Credit shall be allowed under this section unless the taxpayer includes the employer identification number of any institution to which the taxpayer paid qualified tuition and related expenses taken into account under this section on the return of tax for the taxable year. Social Security number D20. For purposes of this paragraph, the 21-term Social Security number shall have the 22, meaning given such term in Section 24. 23. RRMI 24 Section 25A is amended to read as follows 25. 1047. Are rules related to married individ 1. Rules similar to the rules of Section 32.2 shall apply to this section. 3. T. Read as mathematical or foreseen. Section 6213 is amended by 5 striking 10 and inserting Social Security number or 6 employer identification number. The amendments made by 8 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 9, 31, 2025. 10 Part 3 Preventing Fraud, Waste, and 11 Abuse 12 SEC 12201 Requiring Exchange Verification of ELI 13 Ability for Health Plan. IG Section 36B is amended by 15 adding at the end the following new paragraph 16. E-Exchange Enrollment Verification 17. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. In general, the term coverage month shall not include, with respect to any individual covered by a qualified health plan enrolled in through an exchange, any month beginning before the exchange verifies, using applicable enrollment information that shall be 1048. provided or verified by the applicant such individual's eligibility to enroll in the plan through the 3 exchange. 4 for any advance payment under 5 Section 1412 of the Patient Protection and 6 Affordable Care Act of the Credit, allowed 7 under this section, and 8 for any reduced cost sharing 9 under Section 1402 of such act. Applicable enrollment in Form 11. For purposes of subparagraph App 12, applicable enrollment information shall at least in 13 include affirmation of the following information: 1416. Income. 17. Any immigration status. 18. Any health coverage status, or 19. Eligibility for coverage. 20. Place of residence. 21. Family size. 22. Other information May 23rd be determined by the Secretary in Con 24 consultation with the Secretary of Health, and 25. 1049. Human Services, as necessary to the verification prescribed under subparagraph. Verification of past months. In the case of a month that begins before verification prescribed by subparagraph, such month shall be treated as a coverage month if, and only if, the exchange verifies for such month such individual's eligibility to have so enrolled, for any such advance payment, and for any such reduced cost sharing. Exchange participation, nation with other procedures for determining eligibility. An individual shall not, solely by reason of failing to meet the requirements of this paragraph with respect to a month, be treated for such month as ineligible to enroll in a qualified health plan through an exchange. Exchange compliance with filing the term coverage month shall not include, with respect to any individual covered by a qualified health plan enrolled in through an X. 1050. Change. Any month for which the exchange does not 1. Meet the requirements of Section 155.305 of 2 Title 45, Code of Federal Regulations, with respect to the individual. PVPR 6 Section 36B is amended 7. By striking health plan, the term 8 and inserting the following. The term and 10. By adding at the end the following new 11 clause, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Enrollment verification process required. Such term shall not include any plan enrolled in through an exchange, unless such exchange provides a process for pre-enrollment verification through which any applicant may, beginning not later than August 1st, verify with the exchange the applicant's eligibility for enrollment in such plan for plan years beginning in the subsequent year, for any advance payment of the credit allowed under this section, and for reduced cost sharing. 1051. Under Section 1402 of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. The Secretary of the Treasury 3 and the Secretary of Health and Human Services may 4th, each prescribe such rules and other guidance as may be 5 necessary or appropriate to carry out the amendments 6 made by this section. The amendments made by 8 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 9th, 31, 2027. 10 Sex 112202. Disallowing premium tax credit in case 11 of certain coverage enrolled in DIR 12ing special enrollment period. 13. IG Section 36B as amend 14 ed by the preceding provisions of this Act is amended by 15 adding at the end the following new clause. 16 exception in case of 17 tain special enrollment periods. 18 such term shall not include any plan of 19 rolled in during a special enrollment period. 20 provided for by an exchange. 21. On the basis of the relation 22 ship of the individual's expected 23 household income to such a percent 24 age of the poverty line, or such other 25 amount as is prescribed by the Sec. 1 Retary of Health and Human Services 2 for purposes of such period, and throughout in connection with the occurrence of an event or change in 5 circumstances specified by the Sec. 6 Retary of Health and Human Services 7 for such purposes. are the Secretary of Treasury, and 9, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall pre-transcribe such rules and other guidance as may be necessary to 12 carry out the purposes of the amendments made by this 13 section. 14. ED. The amendments made by 15 the section shall apply with respect to plans enrolled in 16 during calendar months beginning after the third calendar 17 month ending after the date of the enactment of this act. 8 SEC 112203. Eliminating limitation on recapture of 19 advance payment of premium tax credit 2021. IG Section 36B is amended by 22 striking subparagraph. CA 1053. Section 36B is amended by striking advance payments and all that follows through if the advance and inserting the following. Advance payments, if the advance payments. 2, 3, 4, 5. Section 35 is amended by 6 striking. Then Section 36B shall be applied 7 by substituting the amount determined under Clause 8 for the amount determined under Section 936B, and inserting then the amount to 10 determined under Clause shall be substituted for the 11 amount determined under Section 36B. 12. ED, the amendment made by 13, this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 14th, 31, 2025. 15 SEC 1124. Implementing artificial intelligence, 16 tools for purposes of reducing and 17 recouping improper payments under 1819. IG Part E of Title XV of the Social 20 Security Act, as amended by 21, the preceding provisions of this act is amended by adding 22 at the end, the following new section. 23. 1054 SC 1899D. Implementing artificial intelligence, 1 tools for purposes of reducing and 2 recouping improper payments. 3. IG not later than January 1st, 2027. 4. The Secretary shall implement such artificial intelligence 5 tools determined appropriate by the Secretary for purse exposes of 7. Reducing improper payments made under 8 Parts A and B, and 9. Identifying any such improper payments, so 10 made. 11. C. The Secretary shall seek to contract with a vendor of artificial intelligence tools and with 13 data scientists for purposes of implementing the artificial 14 intelligence tools required under subsection 15. The Secretary shall, to the X16 tent practicable, recoup payments identified using the RD17 official intelligence tools implemented under subsection 18. Not later than January 1st, 2029, and 19 not less frequently than annually thereafter. The Secretary 20 shall report to Congress on the implementation of Artificial 21 intelligence tools under subsection and the recoupment 22 of improper payments under subsection. Such report 23 shall include 24. A description of any opportunities for FER 25, the reducing rates of improper payments described 26. 1055. In subsection or further increasing rates of recoupment of such payments. The total dollar amount of improper payments recouped in the most recent year for which data is available. And in the case that the Secretary fails to reduce the rate of improper payments by 50% in such most recent year as compared to the year prior to such most recent year, a description of the reasons for such failure. Implementation F. Federal Hospital Insurance Trust. The Secretary of Health and Human Services shall provide for the transfer from the Federal Hospital Insurance Trust Fund, established under Section 1817 of the Social Security Act, to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. ICE's program management account of $12,500,000 for fiscal year 2025 for purposes of carrying out the amendment made by this section to remain available until expended. Federal Supplementary Medical Insurance Trust Fund. The Secretary of Health and Human Services shall provide for the transfer from the Federal Supplementary Medical Insurance. 1056-1234567 SEC. 11205. Enforcement provisions with respect 8 to COVID-related employee Employee Retention 910. IAP COVID AU 13. IN General, if any COVID, ERTC Pro 14 motor is subject to penalty under Section 6701 of 15, the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, with respect to 16, any COVID ERTC document, notwithstanding 17 paragraphs and of Section 6701 of such 18 code, the amount of the penalty imposed under such 19 Section 6701 shall be the greater of $200,000 or 22. 75% of the gross income derived 23 by such promoter, with re 24 spec to the aid, assistance, or advice referred 25. Trust fund established under Section 1841 of the Social Security Act to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Program Management account of $12. $500,000 for fiscal year 2025 for purposes of carrying out the amendment made by this section to remain available until expended. 1,057. 2. In Section 6701 of such code with -1 rupee spec to such document. No inference. Paragraph shall not 3 be construed to create any inference with respect to 4 the proper application of the knowledge requirement 5 of Section 6701 of the Internal Revenue Code 6 of 1986. F. CBDR 8P 9 APD for A. Hiding and 10 understatement. In the case of 11 any COVID ERTC promoter, the knowledge requirement 12 of Section 6701 of the Internal Revenue Code of 13/1986 shall be treated as satisfied with respect to any 14 COVID ERTC document with respect to which such Pro 15 motor provided aid, assistance, or advice if such promoter 16 fails to comply with the due diligence requirements re 17 referred to in subsection 8 20 IN General. Any COVID ERTC Pro 21 motor which provides aid, assistance, or advice with 22 respect to any COVID ERTC document in which 23 fails to comply with due diligence requirements I'm at 24 opposed by the Secretary with respect to determining 25. 1058. Eligibility for or the amount of any COVID-related employee retention tax credit shall pay a penalty of $1,000 for each such failure. DUE diligence requirements. Except as otherwise provided by the Secretary, the due diligence requirements referred to in paragraph shall be similar to the due diligence requirements imposed under Section 6695 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. R. Restriction to documents used in connection with returns or claims for REA. Paragraph shall not apply with respect to any COVID ERTC document unless such document constitutes or relates to return or claim for refund. T. Reatment as assessable penalty. For purposes of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, the penalty imposed under paragraph shall be treated in the same manner as a penalty imposed under Section 6695 of such code. For purposes of this subsection, the term as Secretary means the Secretary of the Treasury or the Secretary's delegate. AA 1059. For purposes of Section 6111, 6112, 6707, and 6708 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, any COVID-related employee retention tax credit shall be treated as a listed transaction with respect to any COVID ERTC promoter if such promoter provides any aid, assistance, or advice with respect to any COVID ERTC document relating to such COVID-related employee retention tax credit, and such COVID ERTC promoter shall be treated as a material advisor with respect to such transaction. COVID ERTCP for purposes of this section. In general, the term COVID ERTC promoter means with respect to any COVID ERTC document, any person which provides aid, assistance, or advice with respect to such document if such person charges or receives a fee for such aid, assistance, or advice which is based on the amount of the refund or credit with respect to such document and with respect 1060 to such person's taxable year in which such person provided such assistance or the preceding taxable year. The aggregate gross receipts of such person for aid, assistance, and advice with respect to all COVID ERTC documents exceeds 20% of the gross receipts of such person for such taxable year, or with respect to such person's taxable year in which such person provided such assistance or the preceding taxable year. The aggregate gross receipts of such person for aid, assistance, and advice with respect to all COVID ERTC documents exceeds 50% of the gross receipts of such person for such taxable year. Both such aggregate gross receipts exceeds 20% of the gross receipts of such person such taxable year, and the aggregate gross receipts of such person for aid, assistance, and advice with respect to all COVID ERTC documents determined after 1061. Application of paragraph exceeds $500,000. Exception for certified professional employer organizations. The term COVID ERTC promoter shall not include a certified professional employer organization. Aggregation rule. For purposes of paragraph, all persons treated as a single employer under subsection, or of section 52 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, or subsection, or of section 414 of such code, shall be treated as one person. As for taxable years, in the case of any taxable year of less than 12 months, paragraph, shall be applied with respect to the calendar year in which such taxable year begins. COVID ERTCD for purposes of this section. The term COVID ERTC document means any return, affidavit, claim, or other document related to any COVID-related employee retention tax credit, including any document related to eligibility for, or the calculation or determination of any amount directly related to any COVID-related employee retention tax credit. 1062. COVID-C. For purposes of this section, the term 2 COVID-related employee retention tax credit means 3. Any credit or advance payment under Sec. Portion 3134 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, 5 and 6. Any credit or advance payment under Sec. Section 2301 of the CARES Act. 8. Limitation on C-Reddit and RE Fund of 9 COVID T-Cent. Notwithstanding Section 6511 of the Internal Rev. 11 and New Code of 1986, or any other provision of law, no credit 12 or refund of any COVID-related retention tax 13 credit shall be allowed or made after the date of the Enact 14 men of this Act, unless a claim for such credit or refund 15 is filed by the taxpayer on or before January 31st, 2024. 16. Amendments to EL limitation on A17. 18. Section 3134 is amended 19 to read as follows. 20. ELA 20. IN general, notwithstanding Section 226501, the limitation on the time period for the AS-23 assessment of any amount attributable to a credit 24. 1063. Claimed under this section shall not expire before the date that is 6 years after the latest of the date on which the original renal return, which includes the calendar quarter with respect to which such credit is determined, is filed. The date on which such return is treated as filed under Section 6501. The date on which the claim for credit or refund with respect to such credit is made. Deduction for wages taken into account in determining improperly claimed. In general, notwithstanding Section 6511, in the case of an assessment attributable to a credit claimed under this section, the limitation on the time period for credit or refund of any amount attributable to a deduction for improperly claimed ERTC wages shall not expire before the time period for such assessment expires under paragraph. I improperly claimed ERTC. For purposes of this paragraph, the term improperly claimed ERTC wages means, with respect to an assessment attributable to a credit claimed under this section, the wages. 1064. With respect to which a deduction would not have been allowed if the portion of the credit to which such assessment relates had been properly claimed. Application to CARES Act credit. Section 2301 of the CARES Act is amended by adding at the end the following new subsection. in general. Notwithstanding Section 6501 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, the limitation on the time period for the assessment of any amount attributable to a credit claimed under this section shall not expire before the date, that is 6 years after the latest of the date on which the original return, which includes the calendar quarter with respect to which such credit is determined, is filed. The date on which such return is treated as filed under Section 6501 of such code, or the date on which the claim for credit or refund with respect to such credit is made. Deduction for wages taken into account in determining improperly claimed. 1065. I in general, notwithstanding Section 6511 of such code, in the case of an assessment attributable to a credit claimed under this section, the limitation on the time period for credit or refund of any amount attributable to a deduction for improperly claimed ERTC wages shall not expire before the time period for such assessment expires under paragraph improperly claimed ERTC. For purposes of this paragraph, the term improperly claimed ERTC wages means, with respect to an assessment attributable to a credit claimed under this section, the wages with respect to which a deduction would not have been allowed if the portion of the credit to which such assessment relates had been properly claimed. In general, except as otherwise provided in this subsection, the provisions of this section shall apply to aid, assistance, and advice provided after March 12, 2020. DUE diligence requirements. Subsections and shall apply to aid, assistance, 1066, and advice provided after the date of the enactment of this Act. Limitation on credit and refund of related employee retention tax cred. Subsection shall apply to credits and refunds allowed or made after the date of the enactment of this Act. Amendments to extend limitation on aid. The amendments made by subsection 9 shall apply to assessments made after the date of 10, the enactment of this Act. 11. TRWR 12 Mensidity Information 13 lists. Any return under Section 6111 of the Inter 14 Now Revenue Code of 1986, or list under Section 6112 of 15 such code, required by reason of subsection of this 16 section to be filed or maintained, respectively with respect 17 to any aid, assistance or advice provided by a COVID-18 ERTC promoter with respect to a COVID ERTC Docu-19 meant before the date of the enactment of this Act, shall 20 not be required to be so filed or maintained before the date, which 22 is 90 days after the date of the enactment of this Act. 23. Thesis 25. 1067. No inference with respect to application of knowledge requirement to pre-enactment conduct of COVID-ERTC. Subsection shall not be construed create any inference with respect to the proper application of Section 6701 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 with respect to any aid, assistance, or advice provided by any COVID ERTC promoter on or before the date of the enactment of this Act. Are requirements to disclose in forma, maintain client lists, subsections, and shall not be construed to create any inference with respect to whether any COVID-related employment tax credit is a listed transaction with respect to any COVID ERTC motor, and for purposes of subsection, a return or list shall not be treated as required by reason of subsection if such return or list would be so required without regard to subsection. The Secretary shall issue such regulations or other 1068 guidances may be necessary or appropriate to carry out the purposes this section. 3. SEC 112,206 Earned Income Tax Credit Reforms. Establishment of Program. 7. Chapter 77 is amended 8 by adding at the end the following new section 9 SEC 7531 Earned Income Tax Credit Certification 1011. IG to avoid duplicative and other 12 erroneous claims under Section 32 with respect to a child 13 of the taxpayer for taxable years beginning after December 14/31, 2027, the Secretary shall establish a Program 15 under which, on the taxpayer's application with respect 16 to the child, the Secretary shall issue an EITC Certificate 17 for purposes of Section 32, establishing such child status 18 as a qualifying child for the taxpayer for a taxable 19-year. 20. AR 21. I in general. The Secretary shall not 22 issue to a taxpayer an EITC certificate with respect 23 to a child for a taxable year unless the taxpayer 824 applies under the program with respect to the child 1069 and provides such information and supporting documentation as the Secretary shall by regulation prescribe as necessary to establish such child as a qualifying child only of the taxpayer for the taxable year. Time and manner of application. Such application shall be made, and such information and supporting documentation shall be provided in such manner as may be provided by the Secretary for purposes of this section, not later than the due date for the return of tax for the taxable year or when the return is filed. C. In the case of more than one taxpayer making an application with respect to a child under the program for a taxable year beginning a calendar year, the Secretary shall not issue an EITC certificate to any such taxpayer with respect to such child for such a taxable year, unless the Secretary can establish such child, based on information and supporting documentation provided under paragraph, as the qualifying child only of one such taxpayer for such a taxable year. 1070. Read this to you. For taxable years beginning 2 after December 31st, 2027, 3. General. In the case of a taxpayer who takes into account as a qualifying child under Section 32 a child for whom an EITC certificate has not been issued for the taxable year to the taxpayer, the Secretary shall not credit the portion of any overpayment for such taxable year that is attributable to the taxpayer taking into account such child as a qualifying child, unless the taxpayer obtains, not later than the due date for the return for the taxable year, an EITC certificate with respect to such child for such taxable year. If the taxpayer fails to so obtain an EITC certificate, such failure shall be treated as an omission of information required by Section 32 with respect to such child and as arising out of a mathematical or clerical error and assessed according to Section 6213. 1071. Termination of certification. In the case of a taxpayer who for a taxable year takes into account as a qualifying child under Section 30 child for whom an EITC certificate is terminated for such taxable year, such termination shall be treated in the same manner as a failure to obtain an EITC certificate under paragraph TRTY B 228. If for any taxable year beginning after December 31st, 2023, and before January 1st, 2027, more than one taxpayer makes a claim for credit under Section 32, taking into account the same child as a qualifying child, then the Secretary shall send notice to each such taxpayer detailing the resultant treatment of such taxpayers under paragraph with respect to such child for any subsequent taxable years beginning before 2028. Subsequent taxable years beginning 2028. In the case of a child with respect to whom paragraph applied by reason of claims for credit for a taxable year, for any subsequent taxable years beginning before January 1st, 2028, 1072. Subject to subparagraph, the Secretary shall not credit the portion of any overpayment for the taxable year that is attributable to a taxpayer into account such child as a qualifying child under Section 32 until the 15th day of October following the end of the taxable year, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. As an omission of information re 13 required by Section 32 with respect to such 14 child, and 15 as arising out of a mathematical 16 or clerical error, and assessed according to 17 Section 6213. 18. QC, for purposes of this Sec 19, the term qualifying child has the meaning given 20 such term under Section 32. 21. RT, treatment under 22 subsection, or as having omitted information 23 required by Section 32, may be rebutted by providing such 24 information and supporting documentation as satisfact 25. If more than one taxpayer makes a claim for such credit for the taxable year, taking into account such child as a qualifying child, so taking such child into account shall be treated. 1073. Orally demonstrates the child is a qualifying child of the taxpayer for the taxable year. In general, a taxpayer shall not be permitted for an EITC certificate under the program for any taxable year in the disallowance period. Disallowance period. For purposes of paragraph, the disallowance period is the period of 10 taxable years after the most recent taxable year for which there was a penalty imposed under 6720D on the taxpayer. The period of 2 taxable years after the most recent taxable year for which there was a penalty imposed under 6720D on the taxpayer. And 1074. Any disallowance period with respect 1 to the taxpayer under Section 32. 2R. The Secretary shall prescribe 3 such rules as may be necessary or appropriate to carry out the program and purposes of this section, including 5. A process for establishing alternating tax 6 able year treatment of a child as a qualifying child 7 under a custodial arrangement 8. Notwithstanding subsection, a Proc 9S for establishing the status of a child as a qualifying child of the taxpayer under Section 32 for taxable years to which such subsection applies, allowing credit or refunds attributable to such status. A simplified process for recertifying a child as a qualifying child only of the taxpayer for a taxable year, and process for terminating EITC certificates in the case of competing claims with respect to a child, or in cases in which issuance of the certificate is determined by the Secretary to be erroneous. 1075. C on forming amendment. Section 1. 32 amended by adding at the end the following 2 new subsection. 3. EITCWRQ4C for rules relating to EITC Certify 5 Cates with respect to qualifying children and duplicate 6 claims for the credit allowed under this section. See Section 775-31. 8. Clerical amendment. The table of 9 sections for Chapter 77 is amended by adding at 10 the end the following new item, 11 Sec 75-31. Earned Income Tax Credit Certification Program. Penalties for improper use of AT-T-Shirt 12 Certificate Program. 13. In general, Part 1 of Subchapter B14 of Chapter 68 is amended by adding at the end 15 the following new section 16 SCC. 6720D penalties with respect to HTC Certify 1718. RID of 19. Any person makes a material misstatement 20 or inaccurate representation in an application under 21 Section 7531 for an EITC certificate and 22. Such misstatement or representation was 23 due to reckless or intentional disregard of rules and 24 regulations, 25. 1076. Such person shall pay a penalty of $100 for each EITC-1 certificate with respect to which such misstatement or Rep. 2 representation was made. 3. If a misstatement or representation 4 described in subsection is due to fraud on the Part 5 of the person making such misstatement or representation, in addition to any criminal penalty, such person shall 7 pay a penalty of $500 for each EITC certificate with respect to which such a misstatement or representation was 9 made. Clerical amendment. The table of 11 sections for Part 1 of Subchapter B of Chapter 12. 68 is amended by adding at the end the full 13 lowing new item, 14 Sec 6720D. Penalties with respect to EITC certificate program. E. The amendments made 15 by this subsection shall apply to taxable years begin 16ing after December 31st, 2024. TF orders to design a PD18BS improvements to the 19 ITC. Out of any money in the Treasury 20 not otherwise appropriated, there is hereby appropriated $2110,000,000 for the fiscal year ending on September 30th, 2026 for necessary expenses of the Department of the 23 Treasury to establish, within 90 days following the date 24 of the enactment of this act, a task force to provide to 25. 1077. The Secretary of the Treasury a report on the following one with respect to the administration of the Earned Income 2 Tax Credit. 3. Recommendations for improvement of the integrity of such administration. The potential use of third-party payroll and 6 consumption datasets to verify income. 7. The integration of automated databases to allow horizontal verification to reduce improper pay 9 ments, fraud, and abuse. ITCP Chargo S12 DBA 13. 14. IN General. Section 32, as amended by 15, the preceding provisions of this Act is amended by 16, adding at the end the following new subsection, 17. IC Chargo DB Nature and Negociative DOE 2021. IN General. In the case of a specified 22 Purple Heart recipient, the credit otherwise deterred 23 mined under subsection for the taxable year shall 24 be increased, whether or not such specified Purple 25. 1078. Heart recipient is an eligible individual by the sum of the SSDI benefit substitution amounts with respect to qualified benefit termination months during such taxable year. Specified Purple Heart recipient. For purposes of this subsection, the term specified Purple Heart recipient means any individual who received the Purple Heart, who received disability insurance benefit payments under Section 223 of the Social Security Act, and with respect to whom such disability insurance benefit payments cease to be payable by reason of Section 223 of such Act. Q. Qualified benefit termination. For purposes of this subsection, in general, the term qualified benefit termination month means, with respect to any specified Purple Heart recipient, each month during the 12-month period, beginning with the first month, with respect to which disability insurance benefit payments described in paragraph cease to be payable as described in paragraph 1079. Exception for months for which benefits are reinstated. Such term shall not include any month if the specified Purple Heart recipient receives any benefit payment under Section 223 of the Social Security Act with respect to such month. SDI benefit substitution amount. For purposes of this subsection, the term SSDI benefit substitution amount means, with respect to any specified Purple Heart recipient for any qualified benefit termination month, an amount equal to the disability insurance benefit payment received by such recipient under Section 223 of the Social Security Act for the month immediately preceding the 12-month period described in paragraph. Certain 8C limitations not applicable, I subsections, and shall not apply with respect to the increase under paragraph. Effective date. The amendment made by this subsection shall apply to taxable years ending after the date of the enactment of this Act. TADSC 127. Task Force on the Termination of DI 12. Termination of DF. As soon as 3 practicable, and not later than 30 days after the date for the enactment of this Act, the Secretary of the Treasury 5 shall ensure that the Internal Revenue Service Direct File 6 program has been terminated. For BFT, ABPB, NIRS, PPS 10, PFT, program, PDAs. Out of any money in the 13 Treasury not otherwise appropriated, there is hereby a P14 appropriated for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, 15 for necessary expenses of the Department of the Treasury 16 to deliver to Congress within 90 days following the date 17 of the enactment of this Act. A report on the cost of 18, a new public-private partnership to provide for free tax 19 filing for up to 70% of all taxpayers calculated by 20 adjusted gross income to replace free file and any IRS 21 run direct file programs. Taxpayer opinions and Pref 22 errances regarding a taxpayer-funded, government-run 23 service or a free service provided by the private sector. 24. Assessment of the feasibility of a new approach, how 25 to make the options consistent and simple for taxpayers. 26. 1081. Across all participating providers, how to provide features 1 to address taxpayer needs, and the cost of developing, and 4 running a free direct e-file tax return system, including 5 costs to build and administer each release, $15 million, 6 to remain available until December 30th, 2026. 7 CC 128. Increase in penalties for unauthorized 8 disclosures of taxpayer information. Paragraphs 10 of Section 7213 are each amended by striking $11,500 or imprisonment of not more than 5 years, and 12 inserting $250,000 or imprisonment of not more than 13. 10 years, 14, 9, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Disclosures of RI information of 15 MT rated as MB16. Section 7213 is amended by adding at the end 17 the following new paragraph, 18. Disclosures of return information of multiple taxpayers treated as multiple. For purposes of this subsection, a separate violation occurs with respect to each taxpayer whose return or return information is disclosed in violation of this subsection. 1082. The amendments made by this section shall apply to disclosures made after the date 2 of the enactment of this Act. SCC 12209. Restriction on regulation of content for agency fees with respect to Tax Re 56. The Secretary of the Treasury may not regulate, prohibit, or restrict the use of a contingent fee in connection 8 with tax returns, claims for refund, or documents in connection with tax returns or claims for refund prepared on behalf of a taxpayer. Subtitle D. Increase in debt limit 12. SCC 113,001. Modification of limitation on the Pub 1314. The limitation under Section 3101 of Title 31, 15 United States Code, as most recently increased by Section 16401 of Public Law 118. 5 is 17 increased by $4 trillion. 18.
Welcome to Executive Order Watch.
The immigrants have arrived.
I know. I have the package.